Welcome to Always Real Talk. I'm Kwame, and in the virtual studio, we have with us my good friend, Jay Cameron. Jay is a motivated speaker. He's an entrepreneur. He's a father. He's actually also an author of a couple of books, and he is well known for his traveling throughout the world. Jay, welcome to Always Real Talk.
Hey, Kwame, I'm so glad to be here. Thank you for having me and looking forward to our conversation. And actually, as you talked about our 31 years of knowing each other, can you believe that?
Oh, hey, absolutely. Hey, look, I've known this guy for 31 years, both native Washingtonians, graduated from the mighty Woodrow Wilson High School. And look, most people don't know that we were in a talent show together. Uh, Somebody got the video. I'm pretty sure they'll post it on Instagram or something one day.
Yeah, I saw it. I saw it on Facebook.
But look, no, welcome on. Let's jump right into it. You authored a new book that comes out next week called Fatherless Fathering. And tell us a little bit about that book.
Well, the book was inspired by the fact that I grew up as a fatherless child in the D.C. area. And now here I am, a father of four. And I wanted to share the journey. So what it is a chronology from age 4 all the way up until today. And it really highlights a lot of the different challenges that I faced as a fatherless child. But I knew my father, so he lived within 30 minutes of me and just kind of walked people through that journey, really to help a lot of us who have been through that to understand why we may have behaved or are behaving a particular way, or maybe we didn't go through that, but we're raising fatherless children, or we are teachers or administrators or social workers or people working in different public capacities, and they're working with fatherless people. And so it kind of gives insight. It's raw, it's real, but at the end of the day, it's ultimately inspirational. So that's the premise of the book. A quick breakdown of the book.
Okay. And we always real talk, and this book is clearly all real talk. Now, this book is not the book that jumps on people that are bad dads, right? You talk about it's a number of different surroundings about being a fatherless father, right? Some people have fatherless fathers that are there, that wake up in their household with them every day, right?
Absolutely.
Some have, like you mentioned, fathers that they know and they see, but they're still not fathering them.
Exactly.
Right? And
so, really, yeah. Go ahead.
Now, tell us a little bit about it. That's important for our audience to know.
I wasn't really sure which direction I wanted to go with it, but I knew it needed to be an honest account of my journey through fatherlessness and to fatherhood. And so honestly, it was one of those things where I was concerned about how much I was going to share and how deep I wanted it to be. Was it just going to be a guide to say, do this, don't do that? Or was it going to be a guide with a story attached to it? And so that's what I ended up deciding to do. So this is much more than just, okay, do this, do that, but it walks you through my journey as a broken child, a very dysfunctional child, a very angry child. A child who struggled with my identity, a child who struggled with insecurities, a child who struggled with many of the issues that fatherless children struggle with. And I'll tell you that in today's culture, fatherlessness is almost mocked in many ways because it's so common and people have become desensitized to it on so many levels, but it's a very real problem that adults are dealing with, and they're taking these issues into their relationships, into their marriages, into their careers, and it manifests itself so many different ways. And so when I started writing, I could not stop writing. It was one of those things where I was like, wow, this was a part of fatherlessness, and this was a part of it too, and how I destroyed so many relationships. All of my romantic relationships failed up until the point when I got married, and then even then I brought that baggage into the marriage and almost destroyed that.
Well, the goal, again, of the book was to help people understand the dynamic. And I think what ends up happening is you just hear, okay, someone is fatherless, they have daddy issues, and it's a guide for men and women. So it's not just for men, it's for men and women. And you could easily interchange the name with, it could be motherless mothering. So it talks about the dynamics that people face when they aren't properly raised by a parent. And so in my case, it just so happened to be my father. But what I also walk people through the process of understanding is the psychology of what people go through, the identity issues that people face when, a lot of times with boys, they get their identity from their father. So when my father was absent, now I'm still trying to figure out how do I become a man in this society. Growing up in the 80s, it was a different world than it is here in 2020.
Oh,
So,
absolutely.
so I'm trying to figure all of these things out without that guidance. So I found myself getting into a lot of trouble in school, a lot of trouble in society, very passive aggressive, had a horrible attitude, but you would never know it. You wouldn't know it from looking at me on the surface. You would think, hey, he's a clean cut guy. He's a nice guy. But underneath all of that, I was dealing with a lot of issues. And that's why, that's one of the biggest things that I bring home in the book to say, hey, listen, just because we clean up well, doesn't necessarily mean that what we're dealing with has really been rectified. And so I had to reconcile a lot of different issues over the years. And my father passed away 25 years ago. And when he did, there were a lot of unanswered questions that I was just kind of left with. I was 22 years old. I was actually 21 when it happened. And then it was 22 and I turned 22 shortly thereafter. And now trying to figure it out. And I was a father. I was a new father. My daughter was born the same year my father passed away. And so here I am trying to be a father. My father's passed away. And it was just a mess for a long time. But again, it's a very inspirational book because it shows you how to get out of the mess. And that is the key. And that's why I think it's so important for so many people.
And is that what inspires you to write the book? At some point, you decided to write a book based on your experience and based on how you're able to help others who could be or are dealing with the exact same issue. Was that what inspired you to? Because that's a hard book to write when you're talking about a fatherless person, right? Without it being an angry book.
And that's the part I needed for it not to be an angry book. I needed for it to be an honest book. So just understand it's a very, very honest book, but I didn't want it to be an angry book. And so it took years to really, a part of that reconciliation process was really understanding what happened and why it happened the way that it happened. And so I guess it probably didn't take until my late 30s for me to really understand some of the historical family dynamics that occurred in his life. I needed to understand what happened with him because sometimes we just think somebody's just, oh, they're horrible. They weren't there and they weren't a part of my life. But as I matured, I had to really consider his story and what maybe he didn't receive and not try to dress it up and not try to make it, okay, well, not try to make it something that it wasn't, but to really say, okay, what happened here? And so as I grew into manhood and then looked at my own children, because remember, I have 4 now, I have 1
Right.
daughter and 3 boys. It was kind of like now as I matured, I can tell this story without being angry, but I can still tell the true essence of the story so someone understands the context of their journey. And so that's what you begin to see within this book, the full context of it and how you can make the turn. And I wear the shirt called Game Changer, how you can become a
That's
game
right. I
changer.
see it. I
Yeah.
see the Game Changer shirt. I see you have it on. Let me ask you a question. For someone that's sitting out there watching us, or someone that's listen to us on the podcast, what are the top 3 things that one could walk away with, or that one could learn from this book?
I would have to say the first thing is really understanding, for me, what I walked away with in my ultimate conclusion was that although my father was absent, once I began to understand his story, I now began to understand that perhaps it might have been better for me not to have been with that influence. And so that's not so much to slight him, but there were some things that he could not give me. He did not know how to give me. And so it would have been unfair for me to really put that on him because it wasn't given to him to give to me. So I needed
Okay.
that space to be able to learn it for myself so that I could teach my children differently. A lot of people are walking around upset and angry with their parents because they don't understand why they weren't there. And granted, some situations are very abusive. Some situations are very toxic.
Oh no, absolutely,
And so
absolutely.
Right. And so there's no excuse for the behavior. But the next lesson I had to learn was I had to take responsibility for my life and my choices, regardless of what he did or did not do. And so if I continue to blame him and use him as a crutch for my poor decisions, then that's on me. So as I went through my journey, I had to say, I'm making these poor choices. Whether I'm upset with him, whether he didn't give me what he was supposed to give me, I'm the one deciding to make these choices. So that's the second thing for me. And the second lesson is really taking responsibility for my own life. And the third thing, the third component is really understanding that I went through all of that for a reason. And that kind of brings us to the whole game changer concept in discussion, because I had to make a decision. Am I going to do something different? Am I going to be the game changer for my children? Am I going to continue the same pattern that was demonstrated for me? So I decided that I was going to be a game changer. And I said, this is how this is going to play out. It was difficult. It's hard when you don't have anybody to show you how to do it. It's really hard. But the one thing I had to come back to is, okay, what do I want my family to look like? What do I want my children? What example do I want to set for them? And I really worked hard at that, and being honest with my own issues and my own challenges. And so I'm thankful.
So no, that's great nuggets that folks can walk away from. And then get the book. The book comes out next week. You can definitely get the book, as you can see on the screen. Fatherless Fathering.
That's it.
There you
Fatherless
go.
Fathering.
Fatherless Fathering. Come check it out. It's Jay Cameron. Also, next week, go to Amazon. Amazon.com. What you're going to pick up? You're going to pick up the book by Jay Cameron. What's the name of the book? The book is called Fatherless Fathering. Fatherless Fathering. Let's make this a #1 seller for my good friend, my good brother, Jay Cameron. Jay, it's always good to have you in the studio. For our viewers, if it's always real talk, you know it's going to be real.